Good evening. Y buenas tardes, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Manny Crispin, and I'm the founder of the Coalition for Fire Fund Fairness, and I just wanted to thank you all for being here. But before we get started, I wanted to actually thank Almo Chavez and team for this wonderful theater space. So let's give them all a round of applause. Thank you so much for joining us today, both here and virtually on Zoom. It's been 2 years since the Hermit's Peak Calf Canyon fire devastated our community. A time of loss and resilience has deeply affected our community. Despite the struggles and the ongoing challenges we face in rebuilding our lives, it's very heartening that so many of you are here with us today, gathered. So thank you all for being here. Tonight, I just want to say that we're here together because we know that something's got to be done. We're here because we want for this devastated community to get the much needed justice that we've been waiting for. And this evening, we'll be watching the newest final cut of Mora is Burning, a documentary that captures our shared experiences, the challenges and the indomitable spirit of the community here in northern New Mexico. Following the screening, we're going to delve into a panel discussion aimed at addressing the critical issues that we continue to face, especially regarding the efforts and the failures in securing just compensation for victims. Before I begin, I would like to invite former New Mexico Attorney General Hector Balderas to share a few words with us. Hector's insights and support have been invaluable to our cause, and we're honored to have him here with us tonight. Without further ado, it's my honor and privilege to introduce to you former Attorney General Hector Balderas. Thank you.
Thank you, Manny. Can you hear me, Manny? Good evening.
Good evening. We can hear you. Thank you.
Excellent, excellent. Well, let me first tell our community that I regret not being able to be in at the event with you tonight. I got called away to Washington, D.C. to advocate for some of our young students in northern New Mexico, but I did not want to miss the opportunity to really express my gratitude for all the citizens that are there at the film tonight, and be honored to share just a couple of words that mean so much to our communities that are all behind this region. I want to thank you at the Coalition of Fire Fund Fairness, and thank Manny as well, a great norteño who is really leading the charge. And I also want to recognize the Lieutenant Governor, who I understand will be chairing this important discussion after the film. I also want to thank all the citizens, all the New Mexicans that are there tonight to share their insights. We need you now more than ever. We're gathered here, and I didn't want to miss this evening to remind the entire state that we are watching because we are on the second anniversary of Hermit's Peak and Calf Canyon fire. And we all know and we all remember that this was the federal government's gross mismanagement. Not only 900 structures burned, 330,000 acres scorched, but the trauma that was suffered from our communities is truly regrettable and unforgivable. I wish I could say that you're there tonight to celebrate a government defending and protecting its citizens, but we know that's not true. In fact, you will be discussing what I believe are unfulfilled promises and joining a litany of disproportionate history where our state has always been treated poorly by the federal government. The reason I also, in addition, wanted to be with you tonight, not only to acknowledge your courage and to ask you to keep your resilience strong, but was to also remind you as you watch the film Mora is Burning tonight, we have to thank Scott Campbell, David Cortez, and Malik Finch, because they are allowing you all to get your story out, and your story will be compelling for so many others to hear. The reason I think this is so important in terms of your story is I want to remind you that the federal government has not failed us for the first time. As former Attorney General, it was the failures of the DEA and the FDA that let opiate pills flood our market for generations. And it wasn't until we took them to court so that they could pay New Mexico over $1 billion, but it was failed generations of addicted families and loss of life. There was the failure of the federal government to protect its people. Secondly, I don't know if you recall, but we had to sue to protect New Mexico state water rights, not only Texas, but we had to sue the federal government because the federal government had taken the sides of Texas instead of New Mexico farmers and some of our acequias and our agricultural communities. And I don't know if you remember or recall that when the Gold King mine spill occurred and the EPA failed to protect its rivers up in northwestern part of New Mexico, we had to sue the EPA to recover damages for Native American farmers and Latino agricultural workers. So this isn't the first time we unfortunately have been here and we've had to enforce state law. But I want to applaud you all. I want to thank Patrick Lohman for leading a discussion in a panel. I want to thank Toby Dolan, Yolanda Cruz, and Governor Morales, who will share their insights after the film. And finally, I'll close with thanking you all for your reflection. Many of you are angry and you don't have to share your stories. But it's important that so many of us hear your stories. And we know that change is long past overdue. In my final days as Attorney General, I want to remind this community that I'm sorry that my term ended. But I sent the federal government a letter demanding that they appoint a federal claims administrator that was a New Mexico attorney trained in New Mexico justice. I also demanded that they amend the regulations to acknowledge New Mexico state law and nuisance claims. I believe that letter went ignored. I further put them on notice that New Mexico would probably be adverse and soon in litigation against the federal government. But my clock ran out. I only share that with you because I understand President Biden has promised you as fire victims full compensation. But as a Norteño with you, I hope that you use the opportunity tonight to share your stories, come up with an action plan, and know that New Mexico has been successful in the past at recovering billions of dollars. But it's very clear to me as a kid from Wagon Mound and married to a woman who grew up playing in Leducs and in the valleys of Mora that it's okay if we have to fight and go to court. We've been successful in the past, but I have no doubt that we will have to enforce law and protect our rights. And but this is not a place that we haven't been before. So my best to all of you, and I'm sorry I could not be with you tonight, but I'm very proud of you, and I look forward to the film. Thank you for allowing me to share a few words with you. Gracias.
Gracias, Honorable Balderas. Let's give it up for former Attorney General, the Honorable Hector Balderas. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And at this time, I'd like to turn it on over to Scott Campbell from American Common Media.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming out, and I'm wish that we had more space so more of you could those of you out in the lobby could be here inside with the group. American Commons Media is a nonprofit filmmaking and media education nonprofit based in Mora County. We work with Collaborative Visions and help out of the Helping Hands building there in Mora. And so we've been working there for several years. I want to say, obviously, I'm not someone that you would think would be a natural for doing this film, but we were working in Mora with the Mora Land Grant and with Nancy Quintana, Gilbert Quintana, on a series of films about the Mora Land Grant when the fire broke out. And so this became a natural extension of the work we were already doing in Mora. And so we've been covering this for 2 years. This is a partial cut. This is only a 30-minute cut or a 28-minute cut. We expect to have a feature-length film out in the fall. This story is way too big to be just a 28-minute cut or even a 90-minute cut. So we're also building a website that will include all of our interviews and other footage that we didn't make into the cut so that people can see it and judge for themselves and hear the stories. And if anybody wants to include their story, either in the website or in the film, please talk to us afterwards. I also want to thank our team. We have David Cortez here as the director. Also, and then you heard the name Elite Finch, who is our one of our producers. We have associate producer Kate Peck. Evan Estrada Gibbons is our research director. Anita Laran is our community advisor. And we have additional footage from Nancy Quintana, Dale Mice, and many others in San Miguel and Mora counties that are included in the film. We want to make sure to thank everybody. So I hope you, I shouldn't say enjoy, but I hope this is a satisfactory rendering. Thank you.
A lot of agencies involved in this response. FEMA is only one. They offer funding to other agencies, including the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, the Corps of Engineers, and lots of state agencies as well.
That it was a prescribed burn that had been scheduled since the year before.
The wind gusts from February to April were 60, 70, 80, up to 90 miles an hour on any given day. And they still went ahead and did that.
In this community, they rely a lot on natural resources, hunting of elk in season, for example, and growing food for their cattle. And every community is unique. I think agencies are getting better at understanding those unique concerns, and we need to keep working to address those concerns as they come up in the age of climate change, which is already here.
I said, when we were fighting fires, we didn't back burn. We didn't stand at the road and back burn. They actually dropped us off at the fire in a helicopter, and we fought the fire. We went with water hoses and chainsaws, and, you know, we fought the fire and we tried to stop it.
They were back burning on the back of this canyon here. The flames were up to 400 feet high, and it jumped over here. That's what happened. That's what happened.
I drove up the dirt road and I was watching the fire across the highway. And before you know it, I heard a boom, boom, boom. And they lit the fire on this side, and they try to tell the people that the fire jumped, and that one never jumped. I was there, I seen it. It spots in between when it jumps. It don't just jump and start there. Drip torch, and they were also using paintballs, like paintball gun, and they'd shoot them up and boom, 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 fire would light up. I even seen some of the paintballs. They were collected by some friends. They have them up in Chacon. They try to even burn the church, believe it or not.
And then, because of their philosophy of burn back better, more fire is better, they spent the next, I don't know, 2 months lighting everything on fire until that fire was the largest fire in New Mexico history.
That's how their homes and their pastures got burnt, because they were burning all that area to meet the fire that was coming. So needlessly burning timber and land for no reason.
So in the Hermit Peak Calf Canyon fire, which happened is that it was a specific wind driving conditions. Those are very intense fires because are driven into that triangle of fuel, weather, and topography. The topography in this area is very complex in the south of the Sangre de Cristo. The fuel was already accumulating 120 years without fire in a scale, significantly big scale in the territory. And then the third component was the wind. Because of climate change, our winds are more intense.
And because of the fire, the vegetation had been burned away. And as soon as the rains came, it was just turned into a massive flood.
I crossed this road 2 days ago with just my waders and my boots. I just walked right across. This is what happened from the federal government, the U.S. Forest Service, who started the fire that burned our mountains, that charred everything in this whole county and the adjacent.
It wasn't just the fire, but it was the flooding after the fire. In fact, we lost somebody from our community due to the floods.
When I got there, it was a well house, which had just basically a low-lying roof that they flipped off. And then the well was located in a pit, which is fairly common around here. When we actually finally got the pump running and started pumping it, that water was coming out black. It looked like soot water because that's what it was. And it wasn't just soot water, it was soot water that had been sitting there for 6 months.
Now that it's flooding, they had to close the ditches because it was starting to ruin all the fields. So they closed the ditches up above, but here on the canyon where there is no closure, they put a blockade to send it down towards the river instead of letting it come down towards the houses. But everybody up above, every time it rains, they're getting more and more damage.
Many of the acequias in Mora were completely filled in by the floods. And they need huge, that backhoes have to go in and dig them out. The acequias, as people have pointed out many times, are the oldest kind of democratic form of government in these communities. And I've got records of our acequias going back hundreds of years.
I think it was done by people who think they know more than anybody else. They don't have respect for local community because you, unless you have a higher position than they do, or have, the amount of expertise, formal education that they do, they're not going to listen.
Forest Service has this kind of approach of we know best and we're going to follow our rules and not listen to you. And they should be, especially now, listening more to local people.
We had to evacuate. More than half of our population was scattered.
All exits out of Mora. If you left out of Mora, you were not to come back. I wasn't allowed to leave the county. They told me if I left the county, I could not return. So I met family members at the roadblock, and that's how I got food and water here. And food.
My friend Jerry Holgriff, the county sheriff then, came onto the property and told me to gather my things as quickly as whatever I can grab in 30 minutes if I wanted to live. I've been homeless ever since. It's coming on 2 years now.
There were people who couldn't stay in the shelters for different reasons, and there were organizations that were helping get hotel vouchers or helping match them up with people who said, I have an extra room. That's an effort that we tried to do at the Santa Fe Community Foundation, with people reaching out to our offices saying, I've got a room, I've got room for this many people. And so we tried to do that. It was not easy because it's hard to find somebody who's willing to stay in somebody else's home, or even in Santa Fe, because a lot of people did not want to leave the area.
Yeah, we didn't have the electricity the whole time the fire was on. We're without electricity.
At the beginning, we were there, and then all the electricity and everything went out. So we were kind of camping out in our units, having to sleep in our trucks for a few days. But we just try to make sacrifices to keep it running,
So anything that got ruined, the refrigerator got damaged and no good. They didn't replace that. FEMA didn't replace that. So we had to replace it on our own.
Thank goodness for our neighboring counties. They were so gracious and generous in helping our people. They housed, goodness, I don't know, thousands. They fed them, they took care of them.
This disaster totally drained our community, not only financially, but emotionally and psychologically as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner, for that very
People really came together to help support the community, and not just locals, but people from out of state. So on our Facebook group, people were asking, where do I send, donations? Where do I send items? And so we were able to put people in touch with Jana and Neighbors Helping Neighbors.
Hello, I'm Jana Lopez. I am a volunteer with Neighbors Helping Neighbors Fire Relief. We have been a volunteer grassroots group that has been helping impacted residents from April until now. We're a grassroots group. We have partnered with Heart of David Worship Center, Victory Life Church, and other churches in the area, who was gracious enough to give us monies to get out to continue feeding folks and doing what we needed to do in the beginning of the crisis. Right now, we are partnering with United Methodist Disaster Relief.
Everything has been strictly religious groups and individuals and mom and pop stores. All donation, nothing from the state, nothing from the feds, nothing from FEMA. When you look at the stores in Peñasco, Española, Taos stores, not chain stores, it's just a mom and pop store, and they emptied their shelves.
I think the Food Depot, the Roadrunner Food Bank, Joseph's Pantry, Catholic Charities have learned a lot of lessons on how to deploy food quickly. But keep in mind, if we want the National Guard to move the food, that's an entirely different process where you now have to go through Homeland Security and get all the approvals. So that's largely the reason why volunteer organizations and people like me just said, we're going to do it. I'll buy it, we'll rent and buy whatever we need and get it done. Because a good meaning thing would be ready to go in, say, 24 hours. It would take the government 2 weeks to approve it. Well, we need the food today. By tomorrow, we're on to we need water. Generators, the government was not willing to put generators in on the water systems because they didn't want the generators to burn.
Even once they determine that your house was last to the fires, they don't provide you replacement for that house at 100%, do they? We will. The Hermit's peak bill will say you had a 2,000 square foot house, and that's just a wrong number. We will pay you to rebuild the same kind of house you had at today.
There were at least 180 homes completely destroyed. Means you can't go back to that property. It's not just your livelihood, you cannot live there. We have a handful plus of FEMA trailers made available for those individuals. That's how long temporary housing takes under a FEMA program.
As an alternative to arbitration, a claimant dissatisfied with the outcome of an administrative appeal may seek judicial review of the decision by bringing a civil lawsuit against FEMA.
Now, if you go to a binding arbitration with FEMA, FEMA's going to have their lawyers there. Their lawyers are going to be the ones arguing FEMA's side of the claim. They're not going to sit some claims navigator there next to you to argue against the FEMA lawyers.
It's been like a little over 6 months since the fire occurred. And I've tried getting assistance from several agencies. I've been rejected by FEMA because
Many of us have been denied multiple times over and over. And a lot of people believe that if FEMA is in charge of this, that we will not be treated fairly.
I tried Homeland Security for debris removal, and they had a 60-page contract that you'd have to sign and agree not to sue the government if they helped you. So
I have not witnessed a sense of FEMA being accountable to the community. And this specific funds that were approved, approved by the legislature, approved by the president, are intended to serve the people in this room and in these communities, to, I believe the phrase, to make whole.
The way that it works is kind of like veterans benefits. We'll deny you over and over and over and over and over again. And if you don't give up, then maybe there's a benefit for you somewhere down the line. And it's up to you to put together all of the paperwork.
So we're going to be doing some full-on case management, which we've been doing all along, but now we have official capacity to do more. So we'll be helping folks fill out their notice of loss and make sure that they have exhausted all of the resources that are available.
I'm trying to understand what the motivation is to take applications before the rules are finalized, and I don't know what that is. To me, there's a lot of mistrust, and I'm not an anti-government person, but I don't know how you can tell me, let's start this process before those rules are out.
We have FEMA, that Congress said, give us a rule. Get it done. You have, 45 days to do this, 60 days to do that. Move, move, move. The minute that Congress didn't have a deadline on something, which was give us a final rule, we are now May. We expected a final rule in January. We have no final rule. We have no set of procedures. We don't know how FEMA is going to handle things other than please trust us. Congress said, and the President of the United States said, we're going to give you 100% of your damages. We are sorry we burned your home. We're going to make it right.
This is what
And-
justice looks like. When the government messes up, when they destroy so many homes and livelihoods, they should say, yes, it's our responsibility to take responsibility and then to pay the damages.
Congress has done their job, and the Biden administration has done their job. They've allocated that fund. I don't know where those funds physically sit. I believe they've already been sent to FEMA. I don't know what happens if FEMA doesn't spend all that money. Where does that money go back to Congress, or does FEMA get to keep it for another one? I get the feeling like they're trying to keep as much of this as possible, string people along until they just give up. And I'm at that point. I'm at that point where, I've gone through the two biggest law firms and that got nothing accomplished. In the meantime, my living has gone through the floor. I don't have the money to keep my cell phone on. So my attorney fired me because they couldn't get a hold of me and they tried to call me. They didn't realize how dire my situation was.
During the first FEMA response, there were people who said, well, the person that I worked with FEMA said, I can't qualify for this, or they don't do that. And there were others that said, yes, they do pay, like smoke damage. Some people are saying the person I worked with at FEMA said they don't cover smoke damage. Others said, yes, they do.
It was just a nightmare for the next 2 months. We tried and tried to wash all the sheets and curtains and stuff. They were just permeated. We just had to throw them all out. There was no recovery, just bookcases full of books, the smoke damage. I mean, it took us weeks and weeks just to get the kind of amber slime off the inside of the windows. I mean, this place was permeated in smoke for weeks.
That's all I got was $300 when I applied to FEMA for smoke damage, and it didn't even cover one room.
Yeah, and they said, well, it's just procedures, protocol, and then once you get rejected, then you come back here and reapply again. So they were sending people in circles, and a lot of people got very discouraged with that.
I have not applied again. I tried to get for my property down below on the damage in the ditches and the fences and the cat line, and they gave me the runaround. They sent me to about 5 different places and gave me numbers that connected me nowhere, sent me back to where I started, and makes a man just say, forget you. And that's what I did.
The way that you guys are set up, the value system that I see underlying how you're approaching this, I'm going to set you up for failure. There's a cultural value system that values things differently than how you value things.
But the wind has never been like it was, the wind has never been, if there had been a collaborative situation where these local people had a seat at the table, and could have a say-so on what happened, and maybe even that would be something that you could do so in the future, that would solve the problem. Because I don't think it helps to just say, again, demonize the person who made that decision is probably has to live with that the rest of his life. And I don't envy him a bit, and it was a judgment call. Obviously, hindsight, he made a bad decision. They're still trying to figure out how to do controlled burns, but they're not really, Forest Service is not really working, as far as I can see, with local people.
And there was 29 fire vehicles on our property. They were camping out. The firemen, the green trucks were all over our 20-acre property, and they were camped out. people had been living in our cabin, eating our food. They destroyed our gate, our main gate. I contacted the Forest Service and they came out and repaired the gate, but I never got reimbursement from FEMA but at that time they didn't even have the rules established. It took a year. I went back there and I tried to run that business. We had 5 cabins and a main lodge. Here's the kicker. February 2023, I have a pulmonary embolism that takes out half of my right lung. I have diminished lung capacity, so half of my right lung. When you have an embolism like that, it does permanent damage, and okay. When I was in the hospital, the doctor asked me, "Were you anywhere near the fire?" I mean, pulmonary embolism is the #1 health risk people that live after forest fires.
How come FEMA is only paying out to the people in FEMA and not paying out to the ones that are increasing the fuel? We applied, and we got denied all 2 times. That's why I don't get any food. Another thing, we got flooded 17 times. Our home, our crawl space got mud, debris underneath our crawl space up on those. So we have not gotten this thing done from FEMA. Nothing.
Last one I applied for was with the USDA, the Department of Agriculture. And they came and assessed my property last week. And they may be able to help us with reseeding and cutting the trees, stuff like that. Fencing, but it's very limited, no debris removal or anything like that. And we had 2 large cabins. I have a lot of debris. But Homeland Security said even if their deadlines passed and I signed up, it wouldn't be for like another 2 years before they will actually get to us. So
I don't even know how to begin the process. I'm tired of the runaround, if you know what I mean.
And for some reason, they were overwhelmed with the amount of people that needed help. So I kind of never got assistance from anybody. I never did.
Oh,
So-
well, I think where the problem lies is that in government, there is so much bureaucratic red tape that by the time we can deploy a remedy in a place like Mora or Chaparral or Navajo Nation, it's just too late.
Another huge accomplishment that we made in 2024 is in January, we published documentation checklists. This is really big because there's different categories of losses you can claim. And before January, we did not have one single checklist to say, you need these documents for this category. And so by finalizing those checklists for all the different categories, now the public, the navigators, the reviewers, the authorizing officials, everybody has a standardized document that we all know what's required to submit and for what different category.
There was a very specific question asked about outsourcing and getting an organization that knows what they're doing. You sidestepped the whole damn question like you've done for the last umpty dozen months. Would you please answer Antonia's question? Have you considered getting professional people that know what the hell they're doing to help you, or at least turn it over to them? God knows when a tractor breaks down on my end of the operation, I don't waste time and days people pooping around thinking I can fix it. I call the tech people at John Deere and say, hey guys, what's going on here? Why don't you do that? But answer her question. Will you consider getting somebody to help you? Because that was her question. And at my age, my hearing faded, but I heard her question pretty clear.
Yeah.
Brown & Greer is a law firm, but they're an unusual law firm. They specialize in helping administrators of large billion-dollar funds administer claims. And they have, over the last 18 months, administered 60,000 wildfire claims worth $10 billion. Brown & Greer PLC is an expert in administering fire claims. They have done literally 3,000 claims every single month. There will probably be 3,000 claims in this fire, maybe a little more. They can process that in a single month.
As an alternative to arbitration, a claimant dissatisfied with the outcome of an administrative appeal may seek judicial review of the decision by bringing a civil lawsuit against FEMA in the United States District Court for the District of Mexico.
After you file your claim, FEMA makes you an offer for what they believe your award is worth. And if you're not happy with that, then there's 2 steps to the appeals process. So first, you can file an appeal with FEMA that's done internally, and maybe you provide some more documentation, maybe you point out things that they missed. If you're not happy after the appeals process, then you have 2 options that you can do. You can go to a binding arbitration, or you can have it reviewed in a federal lawsuit in the federal district court. Now, in either of those instances, if you go to arbitration or if you go to a lawsuit, you better believe that FEMA is going to have their attorneys there on their side of the table doing their negotiating. And if they have led someone down a path that told them they didn't need a lawyer, we've got the claims navigators that are going to handle all this for you, they're not going to provide you representation to advocate for you at this arbitration hearing. They are certainly not going to provide, advocacy for you in a federal district court. So it's going to be somebody who has gone through this entire process without a lawyer, really backed into a corner against the government's attorneys. The government is going to bring in their attorneys for the arbitration. It is a legal proceeding. It's legally binding. It's enforceable by law.
Notwithstanding that everyone deserves independent review, support, and legal advice. But can you imagine what would happen if more than a third of that money went to professional attorney's fees? And I'm a lawyer that I respect and really admire lawyers. And without the right here, and no offense, and Teresa Ledger, Fernandez, congressional delegation, Ben Ray, amazing. But part of getting that money immediate was to be clear that the responsibility of the government is to you directly. And
here is the difference between what Singleton Schreiber, the big national forest fire firm, here's what they told me. The biggest difference is of this case is when there's a wildfire in California, PG&E's on the hook. Okay, a power line down created it. That's the difference. Or something else happened. It was arson and they got the guy. This was started by the Forest Service as a controlled burn that it went out of control. Now they're blaming the weatherman because the weatherman gave them a green flag to do that day.
FEMA, I learned, needs to abide by the Stafford Act.
Some specifics on the Stafford Act that you found troublesome?
Sure. One is there's a requirement to have a certain population threshold to have a federal disaster declaration. You could take all of New Mexico and a piece of Texas and we still don't meet it. So the governor really had to press extremely hard with our congressional delegation to even get the president to issue a disaster because we don't meet the population thresholds.
So they can't just replace a vehicle because a vehicle burned. It has to be your only vehicle. And they have limits. If your house burned and you had insurance, they don't touch it. If it was underinsured, you can appeal that. But that was not explained to a lot of people. And so if your house burned and you don't have insurance, I think the most that they pay is like close to 40,000, just over under. That's not enough to replace any home.
I don't have money I can't afford a lawyer. So a lot of people that can't afford a lawyer, you know what's going to happen with them. They ain't going to get nowhere.
So what I'm saying is, please, those of you in FEMA who are administering this, can we see the numbers? Can we have participation at a decision-making level in what is done in the administration of these funds? We're not stupid people. We may be rural, but don't underestimate us.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Scott Campbell and team, you and David Cortez, Milady Finch. You guys did a wonderful job, and I hope you enjoyed the film. Let's give them one last big round of applause for that. And at this time, we're going to get straight to our panel. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce and welcome to the stage from New Mexico Source. Let's give it up for Patrick Lohman, and he will be introducing our panelists here. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. Can you hear me? Great. Thank you all for being here. My name is Patrick Lohman. I'm a reporter with Source New Mexico. I've been covering this wildfire since early April 2022 on a day sort of similar to today when there were state officials warning about critical fire weather somewhere in the state and high winds and prolonged drought. Over the last 2 long years, I've interviewed more than 100 people, many of them fire survivors, advocates, government employees. Oh yeah, government employees, a lot of lawyers. What struck me as a common experience as I've talked to people, particularly those who have lost their homes, is a common story that just kind of happens a lot of the time. And maybe Toby, you would relate to this. The story they tell me tends to go like this, that someone loses their home and they find a makeshift temporary living situation, and they start to feel normal, maybe a little bit, maybe they forget about the fire for a moment, and then they misplace something. In this story that I've heard frequently, it's been a toothbrush, a hammer, a piece of paper, something very trifling. And then they realize that they didn't just misplace it, that it was lost in the fire. And that in a flash, it all comes back, the orange sky, the flames in the rearview mirror, the taste of smoke, the ashes of precious things that they lost. And I've just heard that story so many times, it's kind of struck me as something that kind of shows what this disaster still is for many people. Life goes on, people are resilient, they find makeshift solutions, but they're still stuck, still in limbo, from a disaster that's still unfolding 2 years later. So the people gathered today, I hope, will help us take stock of this disaster that's still unfolding, and also explain how these communities might get unstuck and continue their long and rich histories in this place I've come to see as just beyond beautiful. With us, we have Yolanda Cruz and Toby Dolan, both people who have suffered losses in the fire and navigating the FEMA process. We have Lieutenant Governor Howie Morales, and we have Colt Hagmeyer, who is a FEMA official in charge of basically all the Stafford Act programs for FEMA. Did I get that right from your bio? Sorry.
Not quite all of them.
Okay.
I'm responsible for the post-disaster programs.
Okay.
Assistance to communities, assistance to individuals and families, and the Hermit's PCAP Canyon Claims Office.
Okay. Thanks very much for being here, everybody. I just wanted to start with the two survivors first. Yolanda, thank you for joining us. I hear you recently got your letter of determination. Can you tell us what that looked like and what the next steps are for you?
Yes. So one of the things that I wanted to say is that I'm up here willing to share my story, not because it is more important than anybody else's, but because all of our stories are important. And I really, everything I do is more as an advocate for everyone in the fire footprint, everyone who suffered losses. And so I'm willing to share my story, but I want to make sure that everybody knows that as well. So my attorney filed 3 proofs of loss with the claims office. I had to file a form, and I don't remember what it was, but it was kind of saying that I forego legal representation to be able to speak with the claims office, which I'm not foregoing my representation, right? I believe in my attorney, but I want to know like what's going on and check on that. And when I did, I was able to speak with an advocate. In fact, she's sitting here today, and I found out that FEMA had lost the first 2 proofs of loss, which was very disappointing. I've heard that from other people as well, other claimants, is that, you know, things are getting lost along the way. The advocate's office did help me with the 3rd proof of loss, and that was finalized today. In fact, I just found out. So that is a big success for my family. It is about 1/10 or less, probably less than 1/10 of the first proof of loss. So it's not 100% success, right? We have not been made whole. We are waiting on the rest of it. I've also helped family members file their claims that are simpler claims that don't seem to take as much documentation and things like that. One took 9 months to get settled, and the other has no movement. But again, I'm trying to see how we work with the advocate's office on that. So that's where we've been.
Thank you for sharing that. Toby, do you mind catching us up on your experience with the claims office so far and the losses that you endured?
Sure. We lost 3 homes in the fire, mine and my wife's, my mother's, and my grandmother's. We lost all 3 homes in their entirety. And so we filed our notice of loss early on, and it was 7 months before it was even acknowledged. And so and then in that process, they were doing the rulemaking process. So we were happy to see the rules finally come out, and then they're not following the rules. The 180-day deadline has been completely avoided, ignored. And so it's been a process. I was afforded the opportunity to go to Washington, DC to, like Yolanda said, to advocate for everyone, because I know that we're not the only ones that are experiencing these delays. I see the chatter on Facebook every day from the victims of the fire, and probably many of them in this room. And it's unfortunate that they've developed these rules and regulations, but not following even the 180-day deal, the deadline. How are we to have any faith and trust that they're going to follow anything else in the rules and regulations? And from what Yolanda is saying, it doesn't appear that that's the case when she's not made 100% whole, like we just saw on the film, that was the intent of this deal, to make us 100%. So I have seen a letter of determination. It was horrible. I mean, very disappointing. our attorneys did go back to them and made some adjustments, and I've yet to see the final product yet again, so I really can't tell you where we're at in the process. I was told tonight that it's in the works, but I haven't seen it just yet. So, but a long, hard process.
Yeah, I imagine. I really appreciate you both sharing that. I just wanted to give Colt a chance to respond to anything that was just said, or generally address misconceptions that you'd like to. But we can start with what they said. So.
Sure. So thanks very much for having us tonight. I'm here joined by Ben Krakauer, who's the senior advisor to the administrator and has been helping us try to correct some of the challenges that you're describing, and Paula Gutierrez, who's our advocate, and many others from the claims office. I just wanted to introduce them because they'll be here afterwards, and we're actually keeping the claims office open tonight until 10. If anybody has questions, since you're all here, you're welcome to come over and we'll be happy to talk to you specifically about your claims. We'll have everyone there. If you can't come tonight, it's open again tomorrow, 7:30 a.m. till 7:30 p.m. But let me say this, a little bit of my background. I had never been to New Mexico before this fire. I didn't know a lot about New Mexico, to be honest with you. I run a national program. My experience with New Mexico was I came in at the very end of the Cerro Grande claims program and was responsible for closing that out with some of the last insurance companies. But that program had mostly been done long before I got involved. So I really only saw the very end of it. I got involved because of my responsibilities today running the recovery programs, but also because of my experience with Cerro Grande. So I worked with Congress on figuring out what the law should say, figuring out how much money should be appropriated, and how to go about standing up this program. I will say that I made mistakes. I assumed this would be very similar to Cerro Grande. It's nothing like Cerro Grande. And so I don't know if anyone has ever apologized to you, but I will tell you that I'm sorry. I'm sorry about the fire. I'm sorry about the challenges you faced. I'm sorry that things have taken as long as they have. There have been many problems, as evidenced by the videos, as evidenced by the testimonies here, by my friends to the left. I think we are still learning and we are doing everything we can to improve. And I'm seeing signs of improvement. We are moving more claims more quickly. We have doubled the number of people that we've provided compensation to just since January 1st. We are now at 470 million in compensation provided, another 100 million or so that's in the final process of being provided. So I think there's improvements, right? But we still have a long way to go. And I think it's important that we are here listening to you, listening to your concerns, and taking action on them. So again, I'm sorry about the experiences that you've had thus far, but please accept that I'm honest with you. We have nothing to gain from this other than trying to provide you all the compensation we can. That is what I tell every person who works for me. We are here to maximize compensation. Somebody asked in the video, what happens to the money if we don't spend it all? It just goes back. We don't keep it. There's no incentive for us to not provide you everything that you are due. And that is our commitment. It's been difficult. We're not there, but that is our commitment. It's what I tell every employee. You're here to maximize the amount of compensation we can provide as quickly as possible.
Okay, thank you for that response. Emilio, I think we're going to have questions at the end. We're going to have, I have a few more questions and then we'll get there, but okay, great. We have the Lieutenant Governor here. I just wanted to, if you could catch us up on where, the state of New Mexico was a victim, of the fire. I'm just wondering can you describe the things that the state suffered in this fire, and where the claim stands there, like losses and maybe even ultimately how much you were expecting the state will claim from the claims office? Do you have any sense?
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity to be here. I want to thank all of you who have shown up, those who are watching via stream, and those in the other room for this important discussion. Manny, thank you for your leadership. Thank you to all those who have gone to Washington to advocate and to be a voice. And that's why I wanted to make sure that I was here today. I have to say that thank you for the acknowledgement and the recognition that mistakes have been made, and the apology that things obviously haven't been done the way they should be done. And hopefully this is a step forward that we can move to ensure that we provide the full compensation that was promised for the victims and no fault of their own. And watching the video, I thought it captured very realistically what I remember coming in when, as we all remember, the orange field sky, the smell of smoke, going to family members' houses and seeing where they try to put out the fire with the water hose. This is real, and this is why it's so important and so impactful that we as a state continue to show resiliency and to make sure that we never give up. And that's why when we talk about what this impact is of the state, anytime our residents are impacted or victims, that calls to action. And I'm grateful that we do have the support from our federal delegation who worked so hard, from the governor who's made sure that she's continued to be there in the president's ear, where I was right there with the president when he promised full compensation to the victims. Now, working through the process, we see that it's going to be our focus as a state to continue to provide the support that's necessary, whether it's access to firewood, whether it's restoration of the watershed, making sure that we can provide the assistance that's needed to ensure that there isn't any contractor. Unfortunately, at times that you see that there's some claims that are done that aren't necessarily along the lines as they should be, and that we have state agencies who are on top of that. So what we want to do is to continue to have our state agencies, over 20 state agencies who are actively involved, to make sure we're providing that assistance, because that's going to continue to be a priority of ours, to make sure that we provide that support. And when we talk about what we're expecting from the compensation, that comes from a separate FEMA grant through the public assistance grant. We're expecting about $500 million that'll come in that goes directly to make sure that we can provide and continue to provide resources support for each one of you. So this is something that we have a long way to go. And 2 years down the road is what we've seen. We still have a lot of issues that we're dealing with. And that's why today is so important, because not only are we acknowledging 2 years of the anniversary, we're acknowledging that we are going to continue to fight to make sure that people are compensated the way they deserve to be.
Okay, thank you. And I just wanted to ask you directly, I've heard from a few people in recent days, especially in light of the legislative session where there was discussion of reserves of $20+ billion. Is there anything the state could do to compensate people itself and then maybe get reimbursement from FEMA or something? Or can the state play a more active role in directly compensating people who are waiting or who have waited 2 years for compensation?
And we've heard the same questions, the same concerns. And while the state would like to have more control of those dollars, because the statute, it is FEMA's the minister of those grants and those dollars. And that's why it's important that when we talk about on a plan and a process going forward, that we recognize that one is, I want to make sure that as FEMA is here and acknowledging some of the mistakes that have been made and apologizing for those, that we recognize that I think it's important. It's absolutely critical that we have a director that's named, and we have a person who understands the stories, who understands New Mexicans and understands the generations of livelihoods that were lost. And to have that in place so that not only do we have a director that's named, but we also know that we have an individual who understands that we're not a District of Mexico, but we have a person who calls Nuevo Mexico home. And that's what I'll continue to advocate for, as well as the governor, as well as our congressional delegation, and as well as every single one of us here. Because the issue is that it's not that we don't have enough qualified people to review the claims. The problem that we continually see is that after 2 years, there still hasn't been a systematic, standardized approach of how those claims can be reviewed, so we can have claims that are properly compensated And that makes sense. And I think that's a missing component 2 years later, is that we need to have a director that comes in and we need to have a plan in place that's going to be consistent. So that way these claims are done in a way that we can all understand.
Thank you. That does lead me to my next question for Colts. The congressional delegation over the weekend sent statements regarding the 2-year anniversary, including this from Congresswoman Ledger Fernandez. She said they, meaning FEMA, must find a new director who knows New Mexico, who knows the uniqueness of our communities, and most importantly, who is dedicated to fully compensating those who lost so much. I'm just wondering, can you tell us anything about the status of finding a new director, and specifically if you can commit to that request, that it's someone who knows New Mexico, who knows these communities? Can you say that the director will meet that requirement or demand from the Congresswoman?
So I think one thing that you should know is how hard your congressional delegation fought for you to get this. It was not easy, and so you really should commend them for getting this passed, because it was a lot of work, and there were a lot of people that they had to win over to make that happen. And so because you mentioned the representative, I just wanted to point out how hard she also worked on this. In terms of getting a new director, we are going through a maturation process within the office. So previously,
like maturing?
Yes.
Okay.
We're maturing the office. We've gone from sort of stand up, which took a lot longer than we wanted. It's very difficult to stand up something new in the government very quickly. And so that process is pretty much done. We have a system now, we have people, we have policies, we have guidance. We're now moving more into, okay, now we're operating. Want to make sure the operations are happening here in New Mexico and being led in New Mexico. And so we are separating sort of oversight and management of the program that I will still own at headquarters in DC, from the operations, the day-to-day interactions that you all have with the claims office and the processing of the claims office. And that will be led by our Region 6 in Texas. New Mexico is a Region 6 region. So this is more like how we run normal disasters. It's closer, it's more local. And so we are in the process of hiring a director of operations, and that we're in the sort of final stages of that. We went through the standard recruitment process. Anyone was free to apply. And what I can tell you is that what I've learned from New Mexico over the 9 or so trips I've taken here, and what I've read about the communities around the Sangre de Cristo Mountains, is that you don't have much reason to trust government. Like, history has not been kind to this part of the country. And so I think it's important that we hire someone who understands that history, understands the multiple cultural communities here, and does not make the mistake that I did of assuming that Las Vegas and Los Alamos and Mora are all the same, because they're not. And I've learned that, and so I don't want to hire someone who doesn't already know that. And so I can commit to you that we are hiring someone who understands the mission in New Mexico.
And can you just give us a sense of the application was open for 7 days? Five business days? 5 business days, right. Did you get a lot of applicants from New Mexico? I'm just wondering if you felt that was an effective.
Yeah, we had quite a few applications, yes.
From New Mexico?
From New Mexico, yes. Okay. We did a lot of outreach before and during that advertisement period.
And do you know when the person might be announced, the new director, any sense?
We're in the final stages. I can't speak to that. It's still going through the process.
Okay, thank you. I wanted to ask the Lieutenant Governor about the recent opinion from the Attorney General's office saying that non-economic damages are available under nuisance and trespass claims. Basically, that non-economic damages might be available under New Mexico law to people who suffered some losses in the fire. I'm just wondering, does that opinion change anything for the state in terms of how aggressively it might go after some of these losses, or whether you're going to join any of the litigation? Or does that change anything for the state?
Yeah, so absolutely. Thank you for mentioning that, because that's something that I know I personally asked when we had Administrator Cresswell, who was here. specifically about that. And I was glad that the Attorney General opinion has come out and said, yes, the non-economic impact damages need to be included in that. So even though it's in litigation right now, it doesn't take away the focus that we need to make sure that that needs to be included. Because not only were property damages occurred, not only were homes lost, not only were farms impacted, not only was livestock, unfortunately, also victims there. We also see that the non-economic damages is going to live with us for years to come, if not for a lifetime. And because of that, while it's caught up in litigation, we want to make sure that we recognize that we fully support that Attorney General opinion. And if in true spirit of FEMA wanting to work and acknowledge the mistakes that were being made, that there would be the understanding that this needs to be taken into account and be respected for that opinion that was given.
How are we doing on time?
We're at 7:22. We're good.
Okay, great. Colt, I heard from Yolanda, and I've heard from a few other people, including some of the law firms, saying that it is a somewhat common occurrence that FEMA would lose form. I'm just wondering, have you looked into that problem? Is it widespread, and what's happening there, and what's being done to address specifically FEMA losing people's documents?
Yeah, we have looked into it. It is not widespread. It is something that I know occurred early in the creation of the claims office, and it has been corrected. We are no longer losing information. If that is still happening, I need to know because it has been corrected. All right, we'll absolutely.
Sarah, there you go. 3 times.
And I just want to ask, what was the cause when you looked into it from before? Was there a reason
Couple
that
different
happened?
causes. One, employee error that happens. We have a lot of new employees who, are learning the job, and there was errors made. Another problem was that we did not have an IT system for this program. We had to create an IT system. We were not able to create the whole system at once, so we had to create a temporary system, then a permanent system. And there were challenges getting things into the first system and moving them and migrating them over to the second, and things fell out. And it's one of the things that I'm sorry about. And we have corrected it. It should not be happening any longer.
Okay, I just have one last quick question, then we can get to the audience, but I'm glad everyone here has questions. We'll try to get to as many as we can. Just to end it a little bit more optimistically, I just wonder if everyone can share, if you ever permit yourself a bit of optimism or hopefulness or envisioning the future, what you see in 10, 50 years, when you picture a community that has been fully compensated for this mistake. Can you just share, to put it into the ether, basically, what you see as a fully compensated community following this disaster? Maybe we can start with the Lieutenant Governor.
Yeah, thank you. And speaking with our cabinet secretaries and seeing the work that our Department of Transportation has done in removing debris, clearing the SECIAS, doing a lot of that work, as well as our other agencies like Homeland Security, who's here. And I think some of the optimism that I see is when our Department of Homeland Security and Emergency Management was able to push back in 2023 and to really make the argument that when you have no documentation or very little documentation, that should not prevent you from getting the compensation that you deserve. And utilizing satellite imagery or aerial shots, that as we've seen that's been done with smoke damage, I think there's an optimism there, creativity that can be done as long as the federal government has that open mind approach. So I think that there's some examples there, but I also want to just share, when we talk about optimism, there is a looming timeline that is over all of our heads. And it's really concerning when that timeline is coming up on us quickly. I know that Senator Ben Ray Lujan and our other congressional delegation is pushing for that to be moved to 2027. I think that is absolutely critical to make sure that we can provide that support to allow these claims to actually be taking place and get the compensation in place. I do believe that will happen, but that is why it's important that we continue to stay as advocates, to continue to stay the course and to make sure that we continue to push for that compensation to occur.
Okay, thank you. Toby, do you have anything? Yeah.
I'm gonna be like some of the politicians. I'm gonna use my time to maybe school FEMA just a little bit in the sense that I really think to make things better going forward, there needs to be some priority given to those that lost their primary homes. Not only us, but I know many of my neighbors and, you know, people in the community are still living in with other people and you know, just having to get by, and that's unfortunate. Backing up, FEMA disaster, when they were here, there was a disaster. And I feel bad for the people that are stricken by hurricanes and stuff like that. If that's the response that they get, there needs to be much improvement on that side of the house. But anyway, priority to people that lost their primary homes, follow the rules that they set out. There's a 180-day deadline, meet them. If it was the other way around, paying taxes, by golly, we're held to some deadlines, you know, so I think they should stand up to that. You know, those are some of my thoughts going forward. And optimism, I still have a little hard time with that right now. You know, we're losing people that are just leaving the area because they haven't received any compensation yet. We're seeing a lot of our friends and neighbors pass away from some of the effects of the fire. These are all unfortunate things. I have a hard time seeing this area ever being like it was before. But the compensation is a key element to that. We need that, and we need it quickly in this community. Thanks for your time.
Yeah, Yolanda, you don't have to be optimistic if you don't want to.
I'm a pretty optimistic person, but thank you, Toby. I just kind of want to echo that and add a little bit is that I hope that FEMA does prioritize everyone who lost their homes and pay them per diem until they get their letters of determination. They shouldn't have been limited to, you know, a little bit of rental assistance. They should be paid and compensated until they are fully paid for what they've lost. After that, the second priority should be anyone over 65 and making sure that everyone in the fire footprint is prioritized. Pay interest if claims go over 180 days. There's no reason why people should be waiting. Compensate for the nuisance and trespass and recognize that the capacity is just not there. It hasn't been there continuously since the beginning. It's not there now with any of the federal agencies. People are still waiting for NRCS to visit their places. Like the capacity is not there. And if it's not there, then you need to find a way to work with people and help them with what they have already, with the losses that they have. Also be transparent. When you're reporting how many people have been paid and the dollars that have been paid, let us break it out to how much of that is in flood insurance and how much of that is for people who have lost their homes or are in the fire footprint versus those that are not in the fire footprint. Because just giving us numbers doesn't give us any trust in what you're doing. And my vision for the future is that the community will continue to be strong and resilient. And the stories that are told to our children are not that of suffering and loss, but of resilience. And I know that the landscape is not going to look the same in 50 years, but that the government starts today to rebuild the trust that has been lost for generations since this country was built and continues every time that the federal government is present in our community. It needs to be rebuilt. And that's on your shoulders right now.
And anything you'd like to add, Cole?
Yeah, that is not a responsibility I take lightly. It's actually something that I tell my team every time I'm here, that given what has happened recently, given what has happened a long time ago, they have on their shoulders, whether they want it or not, the responsibility to represent the federal government to potentially generations of New Mexicans. So we owe it to you all to do the very best we can to rebuild your trust in government. And so that is not a responsibility I take lightly. To the earlier comments about people who have lost their homes, we have created an urgent needs team. This team is dedicated to those who have the most pressing compensation needs, like those who are living with others or have lost their primary residence. Anybody can get referred to that team. by their navigator, by an attorney, if the attorney is representing them, by a disaster case manager working for the state. So this team is dedicated to making sure that those claims are fast-tracked for those immediate needs. So for instance, we were doing a lot of things with firewood in the winter and things like that. So we are trying to adapt to what's needed instead of trying to have everything fit into our structure. The other thing I would say about, I said before, I see signs of hope. I am optimistic. We have been accelerating all of our payments significantly over the last few months. And I think we've been fixing a lot of things that were broken before. And so 63% or something like that, so around 63% of all of the offers that we have made since the history of the program started have been made in the last 3 months. 80% of the claims that are submitted are paid at least as much as being asked for, and a third of claims get paid at rates higher than what is requested. I'm happy to provide data, to your point, Yolanda, about breaking it down by types of claims and where they're located generally. We get into a couple privacy issues if we make it too specific, because we can't sort of disclose where people got compensation within too finite of an area that you could identify them. But generally speaking, we can tell you how many homes were compensated, how many tree type, forestry things were compensated. We can break it down like that. That's no problem. We want to be transparent in that way. There's other signs of, I think, hope too. I see it every time I meet our employees. Almost all of our employees have been hired from New Mexico. Last I checked, 100% of our navigators were New Mexicans. They're people from your community. This is personal for them like it's personal for you. And so I see a lot of optimism there. Our Las Vegas office, for the last 6 months, we've had over 1,000 people a month go into that office. So there's a lot of things happening. And I think that we're finally getting our legs under us a little bit.
Okay, thanks. I think we're gonna turn it over for audience questions. Okay. I think Emilio Sancho up first. Maybe you can just.
Well, one thing that I would hope.
We're gonna give you a mic really
Oh, you need a microphone.
Those folks online. One thing that I wish that FEMA would keep in mind, we don't have a home. So we don't have files. And over again, we keep getting asked for papers that burnt up in our home. And that little simple idea, if somebody could get it in their thick head, we don't have filing cabinets anymore. We don't have a home. One important thing that I think is being missed, this looks very much like every FEMA meeting. Very capable people, but the viejitos that need it the most are leaving our country. They lost everything. And then FEMA told them, you don't have papers, so we can't help you. And that's why our Attorney General in a Mora meeting told him, keep in mind, you are not in Washington anymore. You're in New Mexico. And we happen to like it here. But keep in mind that these viejitos are leaving to go live with their sons or daughters in California or Santa Fe or Albuquerque or Denver or whatever, because they've lost everything. And they were told, you lost your pickup, you have your car. No, I lost my car too. Well, if you lost 2 of them, we can't give you money for that. Why not? I got money for a Studebaker, a second truck, and a classic that I was trying to get ready for my grandson to work on. But when we lost everything, that was the last thing we were thinking about. Now we're trying to get my grandson to get into college or whatever we can do. But yeah, keep little things like that in mind. We don't have filing cabinets, not anymore.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for that feedback. That is something that I've heard is a major problem in terms of documentation. It is a balance. We have to be able to demonstrate that we compensated something that existed, and it's you know, we're trying to be as flexible as we can. We are partnering with the state in terms of if there are state records, we can help access those. Your navigator can help access them, or your attorney can. But yeah, I understand it's a major challenge, and it's not one that we're overlooking. That's one of the reasons we put out the standard documentation checklist in January, so everyone knows exactly what's required, and we're not asking for anything more than that.
Kate,
Yeah.
do you need a microphone?
Oh, I think this is very timely, please. Next steps. Number one, I think what I see happening, I'm working with projects in Mora, working with some here. There is cause for optimism, but something needs to happen that did not happen when forestry started the fires. It did not happen when FEMA has administered the money. Listen to the people, because the people here are resilient and smart. Luna Community College has created the Wildfire Resiliency Training Center, which is bringing together things that could not only change what happens here, but nationally. And that was started by local people who are smart. A project I'm working with in Mora, we're starting the planning phase of the Plaza Nueva project. And part of that is seeking to create investment tools so that when the money comes down, people can invest it here in our people, in our communities, in our lives. So what I ask to FEMA, what I ask to the state even, is make sure you listen to the people here. Make sure we are able to use the resources and provide our own leadership. We are not children. We do not need to be told what to do. We can figure it out, but we need the support, and we need FEMA to get on the stick and get that money out there. And it's not just money, it's lives that you are distributing. I'm sorry, I need to go off on that.
Guess we have a mic up here.
I don't know how to make it work. Thank you. Okay, is this working?
This works for me.
Okay. A couple of things. First, we may be in the Texas region. We are not Texas. We are not Texans. We have different beliefs. We have different lifestyles. We have different experiences. When it comes to finding someone as a local director, we have asked over and over and over again for example, a retired New Mexico judge who has experience with mediation, who understands New Mexico law, not Texas law, not Colorado law, New Mexico law. We have been here in this area longer than New Mexico's been a state. The history goes back that far. We need someone who understands. You say, and it was said all along, that we're going to be compensated 100%. Obviously, that means financial compensation. You cannot compensate us for what we have lost. You cannot compensate us for what we are experiencing in our hearts and minds. But offering someone $36,000 to cover the cost of everything they owned is horrible. It is criminal. It is pathetic. And this country is better than that. We need to compensate people appropriately. Folks here don't have the documentation, a lot of them. They never had it. I am a record keeper. I worked in administration. I worked with the government. I have a 15-pound bag of stuff that I have given you. What did I get today? Notice that you need the same things over again. You have lost my stuff repeatedly. I have been told that there are finally letters of determination for my case. That was weeks ago. They're in quality review, but I'm still being asked for more. Get it together. It's time. We are tired. And we count as much as anyone else. Thank you.
I just want you to know that I hear you. I agree. We will not be able to compensate you for what you lost. We won't. What I've learned from my time in New Mexico is that this place is special. It's not just land. It's not just mountains. It's part of your family. And you're right, we won't be able to replace that. No amount of money could. But I will renew my commitment to you that everyone who works in this program is here to maximize what we can do within the law.
Oh, sure. And just you said it's a recommendation, right?
Yes. First and foremost, I would like to thank you all for being here and apologizing. I think that means a lot to us after 2 years. I think that's very important. So one recommendation I do have a couple. One recommendation for your FEMA offices is the claims that are the oldest need to be taken care of. Smoke cleaning, I know you guys want to get those out the door, but those should be last. Some of these people have had claims in for 2 years, yet smoke cleaning is getting paid out immediately. That's
And lots of money.
pathetic. I'm sorry. I understand. So thank you for listening to that. I do want the very first ones, our claim has been sitting there for a year. It's pretty embarrassing when we're on our 4th and 5th extension. And I just wanted to make that recommendation because smoke cleaning people should be at the far bottom of the pile. Okay.
Thank you.
Why are they getting paid first? Yeah, why?
They're streamlined.
We lost our home, we lost our pets, we lost our vehicle, we lost everything. I'm not jealous because they're paying the people for smoke damage. But all they paid us is $53,000 and the smoke damage people are getting $157,000 plus. Why? Why is that? It's been 2 years. And the money that we got, 53,000, we had to pay for a septic, we had to pay for our light, we had to pay for everything to get back home. We even bought a FEMA trailer because we knew if we went with the lawyer, they weren't going to help us to rebuild. They weren't going to give us the money and say, here, we're going to give you the money to rebuild. They're not going to do that. So we had no choice but to go with FEMA.
And we had to pay out of the FEMA money to pay for the trailer. And go get confiscated when, paid back.
And last week, our navigator told us we're only going to get 50%. Why? We should be at 100%. That's not right. It's not fair.
Seemed like the people have lost their.
It was arson.
Are the last ones to get.
It was
payments.
arson and
Yeah.
we should
And
be filing
everybody that's
charges.
working over there is getting fat.
And we're the ones that were the
They
first
get
ones
paid.
to help FEMA. We did everything FEMA asked us, everything FEMA asked us to do. We did it. We were the first ones
Ahead of.
ahead of everybody.
And my second recommendation is to go back and look. Hector Balderas touched on something very, very important. He put together a 5-page letter. Nothing was included in the final comments. And I recommend this highly. And please take a look at the non-economic damages because we are entitled per state law to non-economic damages. Thank you.
Thank you all. I think we might be out of time. Oh. Okay.
It's an honest question.
Okay.
It's an honest question.
Okay.
You promise hope with everybody here. I didn't hear you. You promise hope with everything that you're saying. You're promising a bunch of stuff right now. How can you and your organization promise hope when you were never designed to deal with this issue? Yours is natural disasters. This wasn't a natural disaster. Everybody here in this country knows you don't strike a match
in April. You know it. Your organization comes in and from the get-go, we fought against it. We didn't want you to be handling our funds. I think realistically, what you need to do is step down and get out and let the attorneys handle this. Because you're not doing any help here.
Yeah, but we're asking people like us without attorneys.
In the same way that you can go hire an attorney right now, and you don't have to pay anything of it. All they can talk or take from you is 20% of your claim at the time. You don't have to put money down for an attorney. That's what everybody here fails to see.
Yes.
There's several attorneys here. Brett, you can speak up on this. It's capped, 20% of what everything that you get.
I retained 40% before the ball back.
We have an attorney and we haven't paid anything.
But you gotta look at your specials on top of that, plus your gross receipts tax, just to be transparent, it's not capped. Only at 20%, and I recommend reading the fine print on that.
So we have. But there is my question is, how can your organization promise hope that you're helping? You're not set up for it.
I won't disagree that we did not have a program to administer prior to the law being passed. We've had to create that. FEMA is an organization that was founded in 1979 on the civil defense era. Our history comes from the Cold War. We were adapted in the Carter administration to handle natural disasters. Most of our policies are not designed around fires. That's a problem that we're seeing right now in Lahaina in Hawaii, another disaster that I work on regularly, and many other places in California. I agree that we didn't have a program to administer. We've had to create it. We've tried to do that in a principled way that delivers compensation as quickly and as fully as we can. I'm a lawyer. I spent 10 years practicing law. I definitely appreciate the value of an attorney. We've tried to design a program where you don't need one, but if you want one, by all means, that's your right. And what your agreement is with.
Because you're paying pennies on the dollar. We were promised from the president all the way down the line to be compensated fully. If I took $1 and I lost it, you and your organization is offering pennies on that dollar, roughly 3 cents for it. There leaves 97 cents on the table. That is a big significant amount. And you have directives all the way up from the president himself to do this. And you're failing miserably. And you're sitting there ignorantly trying to justify a problem to us about it. You need to get off your ass and make these changes. And you should probably have only about 2 weeks to do this because it doesn't really take that long to make these policies. It's the bureaucratic bullshit and red tape that we all find ourselves subject to. That's what's happening here. And it's enough already. We're not even beginning to touch the issue that's going to affect this country for the next 15, 20 years that needs to be handled now.
As we come to an end to this evening's event, on behalf of the Coalition for Fire Fund Fairness, I want to extend a heartfelt thank you to everyone who participated in this vital conversation. The insights shared, the questions asked and answered, obviously, look how important these questions are. This has been an incredibly insightful and necessary for our ongoing fight in justice and fairness, but we know that we still have a lot more work to do. It's been 2 years, and it's high time that our community receives the resources and funds that it needs to start rebuilding our lives. A special thank you to Lieutenant Governor Howie Morales, former Attorney General Hector Valderas, Scott Campbell and his team with American Commons Media, to include David Cortez and Malik French, and as well as our amazing panelist moderator, Patrick Lohman, Yolanda Cruz, and our panelists, Yolanda Cruz, Toby Dolan, Colt Hagmeyer, for your contributions tonight. Your participation has underscored the importance of our collective efforts. And I'd like to also just thank all of you here from the Coalition for Fire Fund Fairness from the bottom of my heart for being here for us this evening. You fuel the inspiration to this work that we're able to do for Norteños, and to all of our attendees, both in person and virtually on Zoom. Your presence tonight signifies that the strength and unity of our community is that we're here, and we're here to fight to the very end. It's a reminder that we're not alone in this fight. The stories shared, the hardships discussed, and the solutions sought tonight are going to be what fuels our determination to keep pushing for what's just and for what's right. The fight indeed continues, and Coalition for Fire Fund Fairness is here to help fight with you. But with important passion and support comes the important work. And with this passion and resilience that I've seen tonight, I'm more convinced than ever that we can and we will overcome the obstacles before us. Let's carry forward the momentum from tonight's discussion and keep raising our voices and work tirelessly towards a future where justice prevails for the victims of the Hermit's Peak Calf Canyon fires. And I also want to recognize our councilman, Honorable Mayor Pro Tem Michael Montoya. Thank you for being trusted ally. Thank you all for being trusted allies. Is there any other elected officials out there that I need to recognize that I might have failed? Well, thank you again. And I want to once again give Elmo, Baca, and Dave and the entire team from Indigo Theater and all of my team at the Coalition for Fire Fund Fairness and all of you for making this possible this evening. Thank you. And let's give it up for all of our panelists. And as a friendly reminder, if you want some more information for the Coalition for Fire Fund Fairness, I'll continue sending these emails and updates. And if you want to spread the word, please visit hermitspeakjustice.org. And with that being said, I want to remind you all that FEMA has extended their hours this evening to 10 p.m. So I see a lot of them here this evening if you want to corner them, and they're going to be open till 10. So thank you for joining us, and thank you for your time and energy. Thank you.